What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Timeless Movie Podcast, episode number 146. My name is Victor Vasquez. Appreciate you joining me on this episode and this channel where all we do is talk about movies here. We discuss new movies that come out in theaters or in streaming. We'll give you some high-level thoughts, opinions, and then at the end of the episode, we'll decide, is this movie, after one viewing, timeless? Is it something that we would want to rewatch in the future? Now, this is obviously going to be very personal and just my opinions, but that also makes it fun for you guys that are listening. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, let me know. Leave a review, leave some comments, subscribe. Would love to interact, and maybe we'll agree or disagree on some of our thoughts and opinions on some movies. Speaking of recent movies that we can have opinions on episode 145 of the Timeless Movie Podcast, we actually had my brother Omar join me, and we talked about probably one of the best movies of the year, which was Weapons. It is by Zach Kreger. It came out and it was distributed by Warner Brothers, and it was such an awesome time. Kind of spoiling a little bit of the episode, but if you still want to listen to whether we think it's timeless or not, well, go ahead and check out episode 145. It is available on all platforms wherever you listen to podcasts. Okay, enough of the housekeeping. Let's go ahead now and dive in to this week's episode, in which we are talking about A24's newest film, Highest to Lowest. This one is directed by Spike Lee, and it also stars Denzel Washington, as well as Jeffrey Wright, Elfenish Hadera, and A$AP Rocky. Now, this film, Highest to Lowest, a little bit of details around it is that it's actually a reimagining of a 1963 film by Akira Kurosawa called High and Low. And that film in 1963 was also a reimagining or retelling of a novel called King's Ransom. And so various different iterations of this kind of a story, but now it's been modernized by Spike Lee. Just to kind of give you a little bit of background thoughts, I actually have not seen High and Low by Akira Kurosawa, but hopefully after obviously watching this movie and after you find out whether I enjoyed it or not, maybe checking that classic one out as well. I don't know if I'll go into the lengths of reading King's Ransom as well, but we'll see how everything goes. But just a little bit of thoughts and background in regards to whether I have seen the classic film that this is being reimagined from. Now, as soon as I heard that it was going to be a Spike Lee film, as well as Denzel Washington in there, and I think this is their fifth connection together, I got excited. And so I was actually struggling to find a showtime. It was actually very unfortunate that this film is only being shown on select theaters. And then I think at the beginning of September, it's going to go straight to streaming on Apple TV. I just don't think that is a good move. These are the kind of movies, especially with like a movie star like Denzel Washington, these films have got to stay in theaters and just make people go to the theaters. Yes, is it expensive sometimes? It is, yeah. Sometimes is the experience around other folks in the theaters a little rough? Yeah, maybe. But I don't know, especially when it comes to these types of names and the recognition that both Spike Lee and Denzel Washington have, we gotta leave these movies in theaters for a lot longer. That's my own little personal spiel. Enough with that, though. Let's go ahead and segue into the non-spoiler section of this podcast so we can dive into a little bit more about Highest to Lowest. Okay, like I mentioned before, Highest to Lowest is directed by Spike Lee. It stars Denzel Washington and a slew of different types of actors. This film, like I stated before, is a reimagining of High and Low, as well as the novel King's Ransom. But just to give you an idea about what Highest to Lowest is about, this film follows the story of David King. David King is played by Denzel Washington. He is a music executive and a mogul in the music industry, and he basically is the one that's running the show of a record label. Now, in this specific point in time, he's trying to make deals in order to get some money, get some funds, in order to actually buy a controlling interest of the record label so that he can actually own the entire label and the entire company. And so he's really pumped. He's excited. He's ready to really kind of get into more of what he's looking for in his life at that moment, which is to just be even more successful. However, right before he's about to kind of complete and go through this purchase, something terrible happens. David actually has a son named Trey, and Trey ends up getting kidnapped. He doesn't know by who. He doesn't know the reason why. all he ends up finding out from a phone call is that the kidnapper wants David to pay $17.5 million. And so now David is in a situation where he has to try to do whatever he can in order to get his son back at all cost. And that's where, just again, the tip of the iceberg in regards to where this story goes. I'll leave it there. But overall, I thought this film was great. I had such a great time, whether it was the music, the performances that you saw within the film, the various different interactions and dilemmas that some of the characters get themselves into. It's just, it's all very intriguing. And that's, I think, really one of the biggest highlights that I can say about this film is that Highest to Lowest is intriguing. It keeps you very much invested in, okay, well, where is this story going to go? And me, as an audience member, that's the thing I like. I want a film to not have me feel bored where, oh, okay, well, maybe I already know where the story's going to go. It's the complete opposite here with Highest to Lowest. Again, I haven't seen the prior 1963 film by Akira Kurosawa, which is, again, High and Low. I haven't seen that film, so I had no clue where this story was going to really end up. And that's really my favorite part. I enjoy when a story can just keep me guessing in regards to what's going to happen to David, the main character. Is he going to be able to find his son? And who is the culprit? Who is this person that knows him so well that wants to, or actually knows his son and ends up kidnapping him? So really interesting stuff. Again, I enjoyed the way that they were able to also play with your expectations throughout the movie, you know, based on how certain characters might look or what their history or their background was. And it kind of plays with those a little bit. So credit to Spike Lee as well as the writers and the other producers on the film. They just did a great job to, again, make this story actually thrilling, which is, like, again, a really good success. Now, let me go through a couple of pros and cons. I want to call out a couple of things if you're still kind of thinking about if you have the chance to actually check it out at a local theater. Hopefully these pros and cons will give you a little bit more color. So first pro that I want to call out for Highest to Lowest is the film actually has some really well-timed comedic moments. Now, Highest to Lowest is not a comedy film. This is really just a crime thriller and a drama as well between a man and his wife, a man and his son, and kind of going through those various different types of situations on how important obviously family is going to be and how that gets put to the test. But because there's so much of that drama and the tension that gets filled with various different scenes, you need a way to really relieve that type of tension. And the way that they set up these very comedic situations was just awesome. Because again, as you're watching the movie, you're on the edge of your seat kind of thinking, okay, what's going to go down? How is David actually going to give up the 17.5 million? Is he going to negotiate? And like, who is this other person? And as you're kind of thinking through those situations, there's various moments where you have David interact with, I believe that it's one of his close friends, or maybe even his brother named Paul. Paul is played by Jeffrey Wright, and they have just some very funny interactions and funny dialogue as well, that again just kind of adds even more to their relationship, but also just makes it feel even more of a fun adventure that these two are going on, even though it's really dealing with something that's very tragic, right? A kidnapping. So just enjoyed those kind of comedic moments that they were able to kind of include just to give a little bit more of the feeling that, like, hey, this is a very lively type of a story. It's not just all drama. It's not just all tragic. It's also got some really good humor to kind of lift your spirits a little bit as well, and does have a really good ending. Okay, second pro for me is the music that they were able to include within this film. Now, one thing that I think is so unique, and well, at least unique from other kind of films that I maybe have seen recently, there's various times where as characters are discussing and having a conversation and you hear the dialogue, there's this very light score that's playing as characters are speaking. And I thought that was very cool. Like you hear it, but it never goes above what the characters, like the level of their voices. It's just trying to add this type of emotion, add this type of, you know, this kind of feeling that, like, you know, you have these two characters that are either in a very emotional state, whether it's David and his wife, or if it's David and his son, you have this very dramatic type of score that's playing. And again, it never oversteps itself. It's always just very lightly there, letting you know that, like, hey, this might kind of infuse a little bit more to this scene to give you the sense as to what David or some other characters might be feeling. But also, I really liked the soundtrack that they included within this film, and it makes sense. Like, you hear different types of music that you might have in the score, but then you also might hear songs like from James Brown or other types of artists as well. And so how they played those makes so much sense because, again, David is a musical executive. He's in the music business, so it totally makes sense why he would be listening to that music in the car, why he would be listening to that music in his headphones as he's thinking about what to do about his son. And so various different moments of how they included music within the film, whether it's the score or the actual soundtrack, that just worked so well. And all of that just kind of, again, gave me an even better feeling about the movie because it's music that just kind of flows very well scene to scene. Okay, and then last part that I wanted to call out was this movie does such a good job of kind of giving you this situation that David is in, which is his son has been kidnapped. Are you going to pay the ransom? And I love when movies are able to put you in that kind of a dilemma. And this is not the only one that it puts you in. There's actually a couple of other situations that you end up seeing David go through. And and again, I'm not going to spoil any of those, but I love it when movies are able to put the audience, put you in that specific situation, and you are now the protagonist. What would you do? Would you pay the ransom? Would you do this situation if you found out who the kidnapper was? Would you go out and just find justice on your own? There's so many different little elements. And again, depending on how emotional you might be, you obviously can do these rash decisions. But I love when films are able to accomplish that kind of a feeling of, hey, you are now the protagonist. You are now in their shoes. What's your decision going to be? One of the recent films that I watched that did that so well, and probably one of the best, is Juror Number Two. It actually stars Nicholas Hoult, and it was directed by Clint Eastwood. But that film just puts you in such a raw and intense moment of, you're a juror for a crime that maybe you committed. And so what the heck would you do? How do you get out of it? And so, Highest to Lowest doesn't get to that level, but it's still very interesting of how they were able to kind of play that very fine line of making you as the audience member feel like, hey, you're in the situation too. What's your decision going to be? And how would you go about it? Okay, and then last but not least, one small con, very light nitpick. This does not ruin my experience of the movie, but I did feel that there was a couple of scenes in the end of the movie where we probably could have cut just to wrap things up a little bit quicker. The runtime is only 2 hours and 13 minutes, but I just feel like there was a couple of scenes included towards the end as you're kind of getting this type of epilogue about what's happening to David, where, again, I feel like we could have cut those out and just wrapped it up very nice and neat and just ended off on an even higher note. But that's just me. Again, it doesn't really ruin the movie for me. Just some little details that I noticed. All right. Last but not least, from a non-spoiler perspective, after I've given you those pros and cons, let me give you a recommendation. Should you check this movie out, although it's only out for about 2 weeks and then it's going to go straight to streaming, I would say that if you have the time and if you enjoy any kind of Denzel Washington movie or Spike Lee, give this one a shot. Try to find a local theater that hopefully is playing it. Hopefully it's not too far. And check this one out in theaters. I had a blast. It was fun watching it with a packed house in the theater and just enjoying where the story was taking you. So again, if you are a big fan of Spike Lee films that he comes out with, Denzel Washington, Jeffrey Wright, give this one a shot. And even if you're not able to make it in theaters, I would definitely recommend you guys check this out in streaming when it comes out on Apple TV. All right, that is all the non-spoiler thoughts that I wanted to go through in regards to Highest to Lowest. Now let's transition over into the spoiler section where we'll dive in a little bit deeper into whether we consider Highest to Lowest timeless. Is it something that I would rewatch in the future various different times? Now, let's go ahead and, before I actually jump into it, this is probably your last warning. If you have not seen Highest to Lowest and you don't want to be spoiled, please jump out of the video now, watch the movie, then come back and let me know if you agree or disagree with some of my thoughts and opinions on this movie. All right, hopefully that is a good break for you guys before I start jumping into spoilers. But let me answer the important question of this podcast. What the podcast is named is Highest to Lowest timeless. Is it something that I would rewatch in the future? In my personal opinion, I'm going to say that I think Highest to Lowest is a timeless movie for me. It just made the cut. I was kind of not debating too long because after I left the theater, I had a blast with this movie. I had fun. You heard all of my pros if you heard the first half of this podcast. But I was really thinking, okay, could I watch this one again? Would I be invested in watching this all over again? And I would. And let me explain some of the reasons why I believe that this movie is timeless. First one is the character interactions. I think the performances of all of the characters like Denzel Washington, Ilfinish Hadera, ASAP Rocky, Jeffrey Wright, Dean Winters, he plays, I think, Inspector Higgins. Everybody that comes out in the movie just does a great job with what their character is trying to do. There's so many specific character interactions that were just so fun to watch and just to witness. You have David interact with his son Trey. They have a very like heart to heart, and they have multiple interactions. You have one where you have David being very much of like the fatherly figure and just kind of showing that he actually loves his son very much and wants to support him. And then you have a second interaction with Trey where at this point, spoilers again, gonna ruin something for you guys if you haven't seen it. What we end up finding out in the movie is that the real dilemma is not that, okay, does David want to pay the ransom for his son? No. The real dilemma is that the kidnapper actually mistakenly kidnaps Trey's friend, Kyle. And so the kidnapper basically kidnaps the wrong person. And so now you have David in a situation where, okay, well, it's not my son, so I don't want to pay it. But who's Kyle? Well, Kyle is David's godson. And so it's still kind of like a very murky situation where he is family. Kyle is family to David. But now he's debating whether he should pay the ransom. And what makes it even worse and what makes it tougher is that Paul, who is the driver and the chauffeur for David, that's his son. And so again, there's all these different types of layers that get added to this dilemma. And now you're put in that position where you just don't know what the heck is going to happen. And so after kind of giving you that kind of detail, now you have an interaction where Trey and his father, David, have a more intense talk. David does not want to pay the ransom. He says, hey, it's not my mistake. I'm not going to give up this money. I can't do that at this moment. And then you have Trey, his son, telling him the truth, telling him, hey, you got to stop thinking about, all this stuff about, buying the business. Right now, the best decision to make is to save Kyle's life, not get him killed, not to have his blood on your hands. That was just some really good stuff. And then it kind of backfires on Trey because that's where it puts David in a situation where like, hold on. I'm the man of the house. I'm the father here. You don't tell me what to do. I tell you what to do. And so again, very intense and great interaction. And even the way that it was shot and framed, you're just in Trey's room and the camera does not move. You just see them going back and forth. It was such a great interaction. Again, those are the kind of things that just when I think about make me want to go back to the movie just to see that drama again as well. Also want to call out that David not only has kind of those two types of interactions with his son, he also has those two different types of interactions with the actual kidnapper. And the kidnapper is actually a rapper named Young Felon who is played by ASAP Rocky. You have David interacting with this Young Felon rapper. At one point in the third act, he finds out who is the culprit, who kidnapped Kyle, and he ends up going to his recording studio and he ends up confronting Young Felon. And they have this conversation where it almost seems like David wants to pass off knowledge to him. Let him know, hey, this is not the way that you should be moving. Stealing $17.5 million is not going to get you anywhere. You trying to get my attention this way is not going to work. And then you also have the flip side. You have Young Felon who basically tells him, hey, I've been trying to get your attention this entire time. You've never paid attention to me. And look at me now. After I did a little bit of kidnapping, a little bit of threatening, now look at where you're at. You're here with me. You finally are listening to me. You're finally using your ears to hear my music, hear what I have to say. And so again, they have a great back and forth. And then towards the end of the movie, they have a second confrontation. This time, Young Felon is in jail. He has 25 years in prison. And now he's almost like a martyr. People and fans are considering Young Felon like, hey, no, he's not guilty. He's innocent. And so now he's gotten even more famous. And he now actually asks David, hey, I want you to sign me. I want your company to make me a star. Now that I can produce and have so many streams, you guys can sign me. And now we can be the dynamic duo that we were meant to be. And so, again, just great interactions from young Felon and David, where you just see these two sides. And it's such a great moment for David because that's when he realizes that, you know what? That's who I was becoming. I was becoming a guy that was only thinking about the money, only thinking about what's best for me, maybe in this moment, in regards to making myself successful, rather than what it should have always been about, which is the music. And so, great stuff. I long-winded reason why I enjoyed it, but I think it's the character dramas, the character interactions from David and other characters that just makes this such a rewatchable type of movie. Another reason why I would also consider this one timeless is I love that the protagonist, in this case, David King, played by Denzel Washington, he's not perfect. Like, as soon as you get introduced to him in the film, he's already under this mindset that, it looked like he was about to retire. And then, no, he comes back because he feels like there's an opportunity for him to make more money and have even more success with his record label. And love, again, when it puts the protagonist in a situation where he's not perfect, he has flaws, it opens up for the story to be able to have a great arc for him. And where this arc kind of revolves around is, okay, what is he doing it for? What is David really trying to get to? Is it just for success? Is it just for fame? Or does he still have the drive because of the music? Does he still want to find that sound? He has the best ears in the business. That's what they say in the movie. And so where is his path taking him? At the beginning, he's just completely lost focus of the music. He doesn't really listen to it anymore. All he's thinking about is the best path forward for his company and how we can really sustain and make even more profit. And by the end of the film, he ends up now obviously completing that character arc and going through the fact that, hey, it's not really about the money. It's about what really drives me, which is the music, the sound, finding new music and things that are just so unique and making them much more widely appealing to the audience. And so really dug that. And I think what really drove him and his character arc is his two family members. You have his wife, Pam, played by Ilfinish Hadera. She is the one that centers him. And it happens right at the beginning. She's a very strong character. She does not just give in to like what he wants to do. Instead, kind of just puts him in a position of, hey, you used to have this drive, this intensity every time you would come to my apartment. You would always be in love with music, that you would walk across the Brooklyn Bridge just to hear something new. And you would be such an individual that was obsessed with finding the new sound of, a new artist. And now he's lost that. And so his wife, Pam, has to really kind of give him that hard talk in order to really get him and his perspective much more centered. And that way he can really focus on, when, you know what, you're right. Maybe I did lose my touch. Now, it doesn't happen after that conversation. It takes him all the way through the film, but he eventually gets there. And then also his son, Trey. His son, Trey, actually is the one that really makes him do the right decision, which is pay the ransom to save his friend's life and his godson's life in Kyle. At first, he didn't want to pay it. He felt like, this isn't my problem anymore. I have my son. Let's see how the police can deal with it. And no, Trey is the one that has to really confront him and have a hard talk with his father and let him know, you can't just let him go. You can't have his bloods on your hand. You have to save him. You have the opportunity to be a good person. Do it. And so both of those characters around David are really the reason why his arc really works, is because he's able to then realize and kind of go back into that mode of what he should have been all the time, which is a person that obviously does good if he has the opportunity, and also sticking to what he loves, sticking to the music and listening to it rather than just focusing on what's the next move that's going to make me more money. And so those two characters around David make that arc even better, and which is another reason why I think this movie is timeless, is, again, the characters. I think that's the prime piece, and the really the constant thing that I'm going to be repeating is that the characters just make this film so cool and interesting to watch. And I mean, I've already said his name so many times, David King, but Denzel Washington, he's the star of the show. I mean, he's got so much charisma, so much energy. And again, one of the reasons why it's cool that his character is not perfect at the beginning. He makes mistakes, he makes flaws, but because of his energy, because of that type of charisma that he walks around with, it makes you still want to root for him because you want him to eventually see the light, see that, you know what, I may have made mistakes before, but now I have a chance to do things right. So, really good stuff. Couple other things that I want to call out as to why I think this movie's timeless. Uh, Really enjoyed the way that they filmed New York and the skyline. They included the skyline in various different ways. You have David and his wife and his son. They all lived like in a nice little penthouse apartment in Brooklyn, I think. And you could see the entire kind of like lower Manhattan skyline. It just looks beautiful. And they include those various different shots of the Brooklyn Bridge. So I don't know. I'm a sucker for skylines. And I really loved the way that New York just looks with all of its awesome buildings and skyscrapers. So anytime they showed anything in regards to the skyline and the night and the day, wherever they were going across the Brooklyn Bridge, it just all looks so crisp and so sharp. And I just love that type of imagery. So one of the other reasons why I think it's timeless. And then last but not least, the film itself, it actually feels thrilling. there's moments that, like I mentioned in the non-spoiler section, but there's scenes that really get you to feel like the intensity that David or other characters are going through. You have a scene where the kidnapper, young felon, orders David to drop off the ransom money, and he tells him, here's the directions. You're going to get on the subway and you're going to ride it, and then I want you to go in between the cars, and then that's when I'll give you the signal as to what's going to happen to the money. And as you're going through it, it becomes almost like a heist movie, a con movie. You're trying to figure out, okay, how are the detectives going to outwit the actual kidnapper? And in reality, the kidnapper outwits the detectives because he actually not only forces David to be by himself in the subway in between cars, but he also does it during a Puerto Rican parade. And so there's even more chaos going around. And so those kind of elements and those scenes, again, make it very thrilling. And then there's also a scene where you have Paul, played by Jeffrey Wright, and David going to find young felon. They figured out who he was, and they now are on a mission, and they both start kind of looking for, and you can see it on in their face, the music that they play in the car when they're getting ready for this mission. They just know that, okay, whatever it comes down to, we're going to get this money back. And so many great stuff that they get into. There's also some really cool moments where these twists and turns that I just wasn't expecting. Again, the first one was I was not expecting the kidnapper to get mistaken and actually kidnap a different kid and not Trey. So that was like a really good one. And then the second one was there was a scene where you see Jeffrey Wright's character of Paul actually texting somebody in the hospital. And he says something like, of keeping it on the low. And I'm like, okay, no way. Are they actually insinuating that Paul, who is a close friend and works with David, he's been a part of this whole ransom and this kidnapping the entire time? There's no way. And so they almost had me in that element, but then we end up finding out that no, Paul actually had an individual that knew who was the kidnapper. And so Paul was actually one of the bigger reasons how they were able to find out who the kidnapper was and where he was actually staying. So just a lot of good stuff. Again, that's really the only thing I can ask for a kind of crime thriller is to keep me engaged, keep me guessing, and keep me interested in what the characters are going through, try to perform a twist and turn here and there. And they almost got me. They almost made me feel like Paul was actually going to turn on David, but it did not happen. So those are all the thoughts that I had, guys. Again, very long-winded, very random, just scattered all over the place. That's usually some of the thoughts that I've just kind of been writing down and thinking about for this movie. But overall, just to wrap it up, I think Highest to Lowest is a timeless movie. It is a movie that I would want to rewatch down the road and kind of go back to it just to kind of watch those performances and the characters interact, as well as seeing some of those intense scenes. But those are just my opinions. What about you? What do you think about Highest to Lowest? Have you had a chance to check it out? Did you enjoy the movie? And if you did, or if you didn't, let me know down below in the comments. I would love to hear your guys' opinions and thoughts, and also if you think the movie is timeless. All right, everybody. Appreciate you guys staying all the way through to listen to my full thoughts about Highest to Lowest. My name is Victor Vasquez. This has been episode number 146 of the Timeless Movie Podcast. Make sure to check out next week's episode as we cover a new movie and we decide, after watching it once, is it timeless? All right, everybody. Appreciate you guys, and I'll talk to you later.